Good evening, Cindy Arthur, teacher, 27 years. I'm just here to follow up on the 5% that Governor Northam had offered the teachers, and a lot of people have been asking me about this. And I've been learning, and hopefully you can fill me in on some of the situations. I understand that the money was accepted and it was up to the school board how it was to be divided up. And I have been talking with Senator Creed-Deeds, and they sent me some language, and I just wanted to read part of that to you. It says that school divisions that certify to VDOE that a minimum average compensation supplement of 2% will be provided to all, that's the key word to me, all division, instructional, and support personnel during the 2020-22 biennium. Okay, so the word all to me implies everyone, and we know that's not the case. 14 did not receive. So I know that you're meeting. I'd like you to ask you to settle this soon, because it was a surprise, as we talked about last week, whether it's lack of communication or we did have a pandemic year. You know, we were all kind of blindsided by this, and we would just like it resolved as soon as possible. I do, if you'll take one of these, just some of the conversation I had. I invited Senator Deeds here tonight.
He has another engagement in town tonight, I believe.
I think so, yes. But if you look at the, this is the budget, the legislature passed gives localities a lot of flexibility. The way I read it, not everybody is guaranteed 5% raise. The average of the raises in any given locality has to be 5%, but an individual raise can be as low as 2% and still be in compliance. And then the very last email at the very bottom is, the way I read it, they have to do at least 2%. So I just wanted
Over the biennium, is that correct?
Yes, over the biennium.
So do you want to speak to that language as far as
Well, it has to be, it's an average of 5% over the biennium for all SOQ positions. And our board did not just do SOQ positions, but Mrs. Snead Johnson and I called Kent Dickey, because the language is somewhat unclear about this. And we told Mr. Dickey exactly what we were doing. We said, you know, we're adjusting our scales. We want to get the money. We don't want to turn down state money. We want to adjust our scales to be competitive, be in alignment with Allegheny County as much as we can, because we're going to be consolidated in a year. We had to adjust our minimum wage, because it increased to $9.50 in May, and it's going to increase to $11 in January. And we wanted to go ahead and put that in the budget, effective in July. So we had those things to deal with. And we called him, and we went position by position. And we told him, we said, look, some people are getting huge increases because of the minimum wage. Some people are getting nothing. The average is 5% over the 2-year biennium. Does this meet the criteria? And he told us yes.
So choices were made.
We just didn't want to do, we wanted to be sure before we did what we did.
So teacher raises, the choice to disperse that money covered other things besides SOQ teachers. My position is a SOQ.
And
That's
this
correct.
board,
It's not funded.
even pre my being on this board, I mean, the first discussion that I was ever a part of about, I think it was the step increases that we gave, is this board typically tries whenever, you know, it doesn't just narrowly say SOQ positions and that's all we give raises to. This board has traditionally tried to include even some of those non-SOQ positions too. So that's, I mean, it's good that in your research in this, you kind of came, I think a lot of people don't understand that. School divisions have more employees just than what the state mandates you have. And that's according to the decisions that the board will make over time. And it does put, when the state offers things like they did this time around, I don't know if there's ever a situation to where they will offer incentive money for non-SOQ positions. So that puts a board in a little bit of a bind. Those non-SOQ positions, somebody or some board somewhere thought they were important at some point. So I don't think we should just gloss over the fact that when the state offers these incentives, it's only for those SOQ positions, and that every school board has to make a decision about that. If there's incentive money there for raises or whatever, do you just apply it to the SOQ positions? I think you would see where a lot of people would think that's unfair.
Do you think it's fair that 14 SOQ positions did not get raises? Shouldn't all the SOQ have gotten
Ideally,
a bonus, a raise?
Ideally, I think everybody on the previous board and this board too, I think everybody thinks, yeah, it should have been, a lot of you all probably 5% raise for the efforts that a lot of teachers did in this past year is probably not even enough. And then with what we hear all the time about where the state of Virginia ranks nationally for teacher salaries, I dare say there's not very many, well, there shouldn't be very many people out there that wouldn't go above that if they could. But it's like most every other thing does when it comes to public bodies like this. I mean, there's a budget. There's only a set amount of money. And unlike the federal government, we can't print our money. We can't raise our own revenues. We're completely dependent upon the localities and the state for that. And the only thing that we can do is take what they offer and then do our best to apply that. Not just looking for what is fair, although that obviously should play into it, but we have, as Ms. Preston said in our closeout meeting, the first time this was brought up was, there were a lot of moving parts to what we discussed during this past year's budget.
And deadlines as far as calendar dates as well.
Right.
In which we had to have the budget submitted by March 30th. And at that point in time, we didn't know what vacancies we would have.
Correct.
In the summer or fall. So yes, we had to make decisions based on the information that we had at the time. So, I know you guys want us to address this. We plan to discuss it in personnel later this evening. Rest assured, we're taking all your concerns into account.
Ask one question, and I think this is confusing. When you talked about the 5% and the 2%, when they give the 5% raises, and this is a little confusion I have, especially when I hear Ms. Irvin talk about some of this. When they say you get a 5% raise, are they giving you money and say there has to be a 5% raise that's going to accumulate through the group, or is that a 5% raise for each individual? You see what I'm saying?
An
So
average of 5%.
Average of 5%.
Not each individual.
So it's an average
Correct.
for the group.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the state's portion of that does not cover the entire 5%. It never.
So when it's the 5% for the group, then it comes to you to choose, or you chose who got what and who did not.
That's a little bit of a mischaracterization.
We had options that were presented to us
Right.
that the staff put together as it related to the budget.
Right.
And we had to go and essentially, we were looking at what was the greater good. How can we give the most amount of money to the most amount of people? And that's what we did.
So in essence, when the state said they're, a 5% raise, then like I said, it's not for individuals. So the locality, so it's for the group.
Correct.
Ms. Arthur, I'm sorry. We might have cut in on anything else that you had to say, if you want to continue.
I know that you're meeting here in a little bit, and I would like for you to reevaluate your priorities. It seems like all the SOQ should have been the teachers, the staff that should have been served first, and then if you need the cafeteria, the minimum wage and the non-SOQ, seems like that would have been the more
Well, the
productive
minimum
thing.
wage is a mandate. That's a mandate. It's a law. We have to increase the minimum
We had
wage.
no choice.
Yes, but to to deny 14 SOQ positions.
And I'm
I
not
don't
sure,
get that.
Cindy, when you look at the big picture about SOQ positions, each division only gets so many SOQ positions, and I can't say and won't say that all 14 of you at the top of the scale are an SOQ position. We get so many English teachers that they pay for per division, so many principals. Those are the SOQ positions. That's why it's hard for us to make a decision. And you look at the big schema thing about who is a SOQ position. That's why this division's always taken the stance to give a raise to everybody they could, because the cafeteria workers are important, the bus drivers, everyone's important, but everyone at the 14 are not an SOQ position, in my opinion. Rebecca, am I correct?
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely, and you, I'm sure you're familiar with our previous scale where for 6 years those people at the bottom got nothing. They were at 39,251 or whatever the first step was. They stayed there for 6 years. So, you know, when we equalized the salaries with Allegheny's, we tried, you know, that was a lot of people that had been here for 6 years that hadn't gotten a salary increase.
Right. Well, this is the last year for Covington City Schools. Why don't we take care of Covington City Schools this year and worry about equalization?
And I can't speak for the rest of the board, but in my looking at the options that were laid out, just in my own internal thought process, Mr. Dressler in one of his previous delegations brought up, you know, it's difficult to attract teachers here. If you won't give the top of the scale anything, then that will look bad when we go out to recruit. Quite honestly, the top of our scale does compare favorably to the divisions around us, and that in my deliberation on the options that were presented to us, that did weigh on my mind. It doesn't mean that there couldn't or shouldn't be room to give the top of our scale an increase of any sort, but it does mean that when we're looking at grabbing state incentive dollars and we know that we have to come up with a certain portion of local match for that, we have to be very, very careful in how we apply it. And in this particular case, I mean, it was never an option for us to have given 5% to every employee top to bottom. I think, you were talking about fairness, that would have been the most fair thing we could have done. And of course, we wouldn't be having that conversation or this conversation tonight had we had the ability to do that. But knowing where the top of our scale fits in the grand scheme of things, it played a part, I think, in how I processed it all. And I can't speak for the rest of the previous board or how this board will deliberate further on that. But I think that is the reality, and I know for you and Mr. Dressler, we appreciate you guys for the most part coming and speaking your mind, being polite and professional, and you certainly have been. But I do think when we talk about fairness, when we talk about big picture things, I mean, we do have to be honest that Covington City Public Schools traditionally has taken pretty good care of its teachers from a salary standpoint. I think we can all agree to that.
Yes,
And this past budget year was a difficult one. COVID impacted it heavily. And then on top of that, we have a governor standing in Richmond basically saying 5%, 5%, 5%. Well, the people in this room by this point should all know if the governor says 5%, it doesn't mean 5% is coming from him. It's way more complicated than that, and especially given consolidation in the backdrop of all of this, combined with the fact that level funding from our locality, that was pretty clearly communicated early on. The city of Covington is not in a flush financial position. I think they've been clear on that. So there was a lot, as Ms. Preston said in the closeout meeting, there was a lot of moving parts to this. So.
Well, it was a very difficult year, and if possible, and it might be something we don't understand about, changing the pay scale or something, but a bonus or something for our efforts last year would go a long way with us.
But when we gave the initial stipend for that very reason, one of the things we said publicly, if we're able to do more, we would do our best to find the money.
Yes.
And we ask that question on a regular basis, are we still going to be able to do that? Is this possible? So,
I think the biggest disappointment, and it's really hard for me to swallow, is when the money was given for raises, you know, we thought it was going to be used for raises, and we hear that it was used for salary equalization. And to me, that's two separate entities. When the state is going to give you $1.2 million the first year for salary equalization, and then $600,000 each year after that for the next 3 years, that's $3 million to put towards salary equalization. And we feel like our raises were put toward that when you're already getting money.
Well, no, they went towards salary increases. That we didn't take money away from anyone.
Right.
So we were facing that equalization task at the same time, simultaneously. So in providing increases, the option that we chose, it also was dual purpose as it provided some equalization in comparison to the other salary scale.
Mr. Dressler, I've got an answer for that, but I would like to give Ms. Arthur an opportunity for a second time to finish any of her comments there. I'm sorry.
No, just one totally unrelated thing. Looking towards consolidation, I have been asked by some of my peers to share a thought for your entertainment. Has anyone entertained the idea of having year-round school when we join? Considering we'll have the technical center and everything, it'd be a great opportunity for our area and something to look forward to. And a lot of us are in favor of that, in case you were wondering. And so I appreciate
The
that.
answer to that is no, that has not been specifically discussed in the context of a consolidated division, but just having done scratching the surface level research on it myself, I think there would be a lot of good debate about the efficacy of that as far as learning goes. I think there would be some folks in the community that would probably be a proponent of it.
And the studies show it's very beneficial for the students. You don't lose that learning gap, with the summer and everything. And there's a lot of good models out there, so we can maybe explore that in the future.
Right.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dressler, the $3 million, you kind of went 1.2 and then 3 million for salary equalization. That's a really, really, really broad generalization. What we were discussing and the topic of every delegation you've had, at least the last 3 meetings, has principally been about salaries and that sort of thing. So that we did not receive $3 million for salary equalization. $3 million was the total appropriation from the General Assembly to this point. But it was not all earmarked, nor did the Joint School Services Committee ever say, we want $3 million for salary equalization. That was never the price tag of it. We were pretty transparent. I mean, roughly from the December 2019 study that was conducted, the figure was like just under $500,000 for a year one equalization. So
the first year, you're not getting the 1.2 million the first year for equalization?
that's not at all what I said. It's just the salary equalization is not 1.2 or $3 million. That's kind of what you said.
So how much is the consolidation committee going to get to help with equalization from the state?
Well, to help. So you just kind of changed. You changed completely the meaning of what you said. Your comment was basically that the new division would get $3 million for salary
over
equalization.
an expanded of years.
It's not just for salary equalization.
It's not? Okay.
There's benefit equalization in there as well.
Okay.
We have had no discussion to benefits whatsoever. The early retirement incentive program that was much discussed. I think you and I had a conversation.
So the
about
1.2, then the 600, then the 600, then the 600 can be used for other things than salary equalization.
Yeah, but none of that was not earmarked exclusively for $3 million or for salary equalization, and that's sort of how your comments that's how it hit my ear there.
Okay.
There's some.
That's why I'm asking. I just want answers. You answered that.
We'll leave that right there for
You answered
now.
it. The comment.
Okay.
All right, thank you both. Anybody else at this time?